What's going on, guys, and welcome to Old School Game Reviews, the series in which I hold games from previous gen platforms to the same standards as modern day games minus their graphics. I'm your host Alf, and today we're reviewing Super Mario Sunshine. Chances are you haven't, but if you've been following my channel for about 4 months, you know that the most recent entry in the Old School Game Reviews series was my review for Super Mario 64, and since then I've been trying to think of more games I could do Old School Game Reviews of. Most of the games to crack the list ended up being 3D Mario games, so I thought it would be a good idea to do an Old School game review of every single 3D Mario game, except naturally Super Mario 3D Land, cause it sucks! Just kidding, it's because I don't have a 3DS capture card or really anything to say about it, but aside from 3D Land, over the course of a few months, I'd like to pop out a review of every 3D Mario game in order of release. If you know the order of 3D Mario releases, or just the title of this video, you'll know that next up on the chopping block is Super Mario Sunshine. When I first thought to do a review of Sunshine, I anticipated the process to be much easier than I'm finding it to be now. I've been going back and forth on ways to organize the video and criticize the game for a good while now, and I'm still not sure if the finished script is one I'm happy with. Nevertheless, none of you probably care because all the work is done by the time you're seeing this, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy this imperfect yet labor-intensive review of Super Mario Sunshine. To start off, let's get some introductions out of the way. Super Mario Sunshine sees Mario and the gang taking a tropical vacation on a beautiful island called Isle Delfino. When they arrive, the island's guardian shine sprites have been taken, and some shadow version of Mario is using a weird paintbrush thing to cover the island in his magical icky paint-like goop. Mario is mistaken for this shadowy version of himself by the island's resident Piantas, and is taken to court on the matter. His punishment is to clean the island and return the shine sprites or something? I don't really remember. I'm gonna watch the intro cutscene like 5 times soon to get footage, but right now I'm just in the early stages of script writing. Look, I don't know, just let me be lazy, alright? You then collect the missing shines by completing objectives in the game's various levels, with the main town of Delfino Plaza serving as the game's hub world. Now that we've covered the basics, let's talk about the game's controls. The quality of a game's controls can be subjective oftentimes, but I am of the opinion that Mario and Super Mario Sunshine controls fantastically. He moves with such a high level of speed and agility, and while this can be jarring on occasion or when first starting out, I think that Mario's increased speed in this game was a welcome addition. Since Mario Sunshine holds bigger worlds than most 3D Mario games, it feels good to be able to move around very quickly, and the game rarely throws platforming challenges your way that make movement awkward. I'll get into level design later though, right now we're still on controls. While running and ordinary jumping feel great in this game, Mario's moveset has seen something of a downgrade from Super Mario 64. I've been trying to decide how fair it is to compare old school game review games to other similar games for a while, and while I won't compare Super Mario Sunshine to Odyssey or something, I do think it's fair to compare Super Mario Sunshine to its predecessor, Super Mario 64. Most of the moves Mario gained in Super Mario 64 have been retained in Sunshine, the dive, side flip, ground pound, etc., but 2 omissions in particular stand out to me, the long jump and the backflip. The absence of the long jump was disappointing to me, but with the overpoweredness of Mario's new spin jump and the increased usefulness of the dive, I think I'll give that one a pass. Surprisingly, the move absent from Sunshine that I miss the most is the backflip, being caused by a lack of crouching in general. When in midair, the left trigger still causes Mario to ground pound, but when grounded, pressing the trigger will simply center the camera. This is a welcome change for reasons I'll get to later, but there are a lot of areas in the game where I feel like the backflip would be useful. The backflip is essentially a stationary version of the side flip, providing a greater height than an ordinary jump, but in tighter spaces or on thin ledges or platforms, I often wish I could get that extra height without having to run the risk of falling for a side flip. Maybe this omission was intended by the developer for that exact reason, I don't know, but this added difficulty to world traversal in certain areas sort of goes against the game's explorative nature. It's not a huge issue though, and Mario's controls are still buttery smooth as always. But anyway, here I am talking for all this time about Mario's movement without even mentioning the game's biggest new mechanic, the Flood Pack. Flood is Super Mario Sunshine's main gimmick, if you will, with all of its abilities using a built-in water tank that can refill when you try to activate it while in the water. When you first obtain it, the Flash Liquidizer Ultra Dousing device serves as your talking robot companion backpack with 2 settings, the spray nozzle and the hover nozzle. Also, there's a huge metal spike right behind Mario's head, but let's just ignore that part for now. I'm not really sure what the designers were going for then. Regardless, the spray nozzle acts as the default setting for Flood, essentially giving Mario a huge super soaker with which to spray enemies and paint-like goop. The spray nozzle, though it does get kinda old after a while, can provide some interesting gameplay in boss fights. All Flood nozzles are activated with the R button, sometimes making use of the GameCube controller's analog triggers. These analog triggers are used the most heavily with the spray nozzle, as pushing R in partially will allow Mario to spray water while still moving, and pushing R in all the way locks Mario in place while spraying water, allowing the player to enter a sort of free aim mode. While this does sort of justify the use of analog triggers, I found myself almost exclusively using the free free aim mode option outside of the game's Shadow Mario chases, which I'll talk about later. When you first get FLUDD, the other nozzle it comes with is the hover nozzle, which is the one I use about 95% of the time. The hover nozzle shoots water out of the bottom of FLUDD like a jetpack, lengthening Mario's jumps while slowly and slightly moving Mario up before its few second timer runs out. The hover nozzle is extremely useful, and many players will argue that it breaks the game. While the hover nozzle does make platforming much easier, I don't see this as a problem. Super Mario Sunshine is more about exploration than platforming, and when the game does want you to do some good old-fashioned platforming, it just takes the FLUDD away entirely. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. That's more level design and world design stuff again, and we're still on FLUDD. Later in the game, you unlock two more nozzles for FLUDD, the rocket and turbo nozzles, and these provide the only major issues I have with the inclusion of the FLUDD. The rocket nozzle, upon charging up, shoots Mario very high in one quick burst, and the turbo nozzle allows Mario to blast at incredible speeds until FLUDD's tank is drained, even gliding across the water. My issues then come not from their functionality, but rather the way these two nozzles were implemented into the actual game. The two nozzles first appear separately in Delfino Plaza on Shadow Mario missions, and upon completing these missions, you unlock the respective nozzles exclusively for use in the plaza, and this is where my concerns begin. The nozzles provide a nice sense of progression, opening up levels and secrets, but why can they only be used in Delfino Plaza? Although very underused, these extra nozzles do appear in the game's main levels, but as far as I know, their appearance is totally unrelated to the nozzles' presence in Delfino Plaza. You might have to unlock them in Delfino Plaza before they unlock in the levels or something, but even if you have gained use of them in the plaza, only specific missions in specific levels allow the use of them. I might have the system slightly mixed up because it's pretty confusing, but I do have at least the basics correct, and this system is very weird to me. A recurring observation of mine as I look at the game more analytically is that the game was likely rushed, and maybe this short development process didn't give the devs the needed time to build the levels in a way that could accommodate use of the FLUDD without breaking the game? I don't know, but it feels weird having to unlock these nozzles after having already gained use of said nozzles. Unfortunately for Mario Sunshine, that's not where my issues with the FLUDD end. See, with the exception of the permanent inclusion to Mario's moveset of the spray nozzle, all of FLUDD's nozzles are accessed via these box thingies with the nozzle's logos on them. When you jump on one of these boxes, the box's respective nozzle pops out, and Mario can absorb it for use in a manner similar to nearly every other Mario power-up. The problem with this system is that after absorbing new FLUDD nozzles, Mario loses the ability to use whichever old nozzle he had that wasn't the spray nozzle. Mario can only have two nozzles equipped at any given time, so if you pick up the rocket nozzle while you already have the hover nozzle, you can no longer use the hover nozzle. The rocket nozzle is useful and all, but the hover nozzle is just more useful. The blast and rocket nozzles act largely as keys to certain areas, but the hover nozzle is great to have at all times to assist in platforming. I don't know why the game doesn't just let Mario have and switch between more of the nozzles at the same time, but it doesn't. This issue would be more forgivable if the spray nozzle wasn't the default nozzle, but it's required for certain bosses and secrets, so that simply couldn't happen. Even though the hover nozzle is way more useful 95% of the time, you're still required to keep the spray nozzle. Even with those issues I have with FLUDD, I still have one more, and that's that it's criminally underused. I touched on this earlier, but only 2 of the 4 nozzles were used to a satisfying degree in my opinion, and those are even stretching it a bit. The spray nozzle is fine, used to fight bosses and solve puzzles, and the hover nozzle is okay too, I suppose. It's mostly used as a backup for when you mess up while platforming, which isn't exactly super creative, but I guess it's an okay use. Then we've got the rocket nozzle, which was less disappointing than a certain other nozzle, but it's still pretty underwhelming. It's almost exclusively used to reach higher ground and find secrets, which is a really obvious mechanic, and it never really goes anywhere. The only redeeming quality of the rocket nozzle is that it shoots you high enough to do this weird super ground pound thing, and this is used in a handful of interesting ways. Nothing special, so it's still not a great nozzle, but it isn't awful. Then we come to the turbo nozzle, which really just makes me sad. The turbo nozzle is super cool and fun to blast around Delfino Plaza with, but as for actual uses, it's even worse than the rocket nozzle. All you ever really do with the turbo nozzle is bust open doors into secret areas and do like 2 or 3 boring platforming sections with it. You never do any interesting platforming with it, you never fight any cool bosses with it, you don't even need to go fast with it most of the time. It's just used to clear large gaps and break down doors. The rocket nozzle and turbo nozzles had so much potential, but especially for the turbo nozzle, that potential was completely wasted. Before we wrap up with controls and mechanics, there's one other noteworthy thing you've got at your disposal in Mario Sunshine, and that's our old pal Yoshi. After collecting a certain number of shines, another Shadow Mario mission appears in Delfino Plaza, and by completing this one, you unlock Yoshi. Unlike in other games though, to get Yoshi out of his egg, we've gotta feed him whatever type of fruit he's thinking about. That's random, but okay, you feed him, so let's go. He's got a fruit meter now? And he disintegrates in water too. Yeah, Yoshi in Mario Sunshine, unfortunately, is also pretty disappointing. Outside of 1 or 2 instances, the fruit and dissolving water things are just a little annoying, but like certain flood nozzles, I'm just unhappy with the way Yoshi was implemented into the game. He's basically only used as a key to other areas throughout the entire game, and though I can't remember him being used super satisfyingly in any other games, this still feels like a missed opportunity to me. Yoshi can hover in the air with his flutter kick, kill enemies, and eat fruits with his tongue, but now he can also puke up fruit juice. Again, a weird inclusion on the developer's part, but this fruit vomit is exactly the same as Mario's spray nozzle in its first mode. Yoshi can run and gun with his vomit while cleaning up the icky paint-like goop, but he also serves another purpose. His vomit is the only way to get rid of this weird orange icky paint-like— No, it's not that. I literally have no idea what this stuff is supposed to be. But Yoshi's barf is the only way to get rid of it, and also certain boos in a mission I'll get to later. What this means is that multiple shines in the game are simply boiled down to finding a Yoshi egg and whatever fruit he happens to be wanting at that point, then spraying the goop or boo he needs to get rid of. These missions aren't fun to me in the slightest, and really just serve as a way to pad out the game. One last thing before we stop, because I couldn't find a way to fit it into the main portion of the review, let's talk about camera. If you've seen my top 5 most wanted Switch games, card in the corner if you haven't, you're probably aware that I'm not very fond of Super Mario Sunshine's camera. Before we get into why I don't like it though, let's talk about what it does have going for it, and compared to Mario 64's camera, there are some major improvements. The GameCube controller's C-Stick allows for full 3D camera control for the first time in a Mario game, and it works exactly as you'd expect. You can look in all directions, zoom in and out, it's basically all I could ask for. As I mentioned earlier, when Mario is grounded, the left trigger will center the camera behind Mario, and this, in theory, would make Mario Sunshine's a near-perfect camera. There's also a little silhouette effect thingy that happens when Mario would otherwise be invisibly covered behind a large object, so outside of a few tight spaces making the camera awkward, what's my problem with it? Well, this could be pretty controversial, and some people might get angry. The X-axis is inverted. Yeah, I'm not gonna prove it to you by breaking out the camera again and giving you another hand reveal, but while normal 3D games see a push on the second stick to the left pan the camera to the left, Super Mario Sunshine has this feature backwards. This may seem small, but there's no way to turn it back to normal, and this feature can totally mess up not only the way you play Super Mario Sunshine, but also the way you play other 3D games in general. This feature is the reason that I almost exclusively control Mario Sunshine's camera by centering it behind Mario, because if I didn't, I would mess up every other 3D game I played once I got used to it. I won't count this against Mario Sunshine's final score because maybe second stick camera controls hadn't quite been figured out yet in 2002. I honestly have no idea whether that's the case, I wasn't even born yet when the game came out, but gosh darn it, it's just so frustrating. Aside from the inverted Y-axis, Mario Sunshine's camera is pretty good, but a massive step up from Super Mario 64's. Okay, we're finally done with the game's controls and basic mechanics, and to recap, I'd say they're okay. I know I spent more time talking about their negatives than their positives, but that's just because it's easier to say bad things than good things pretty much on any topic. Mario's moveset, the flood nozzles, and even Yoshi at least have something fun or cool going for them, even if many of those features were criminally underused. While somewhat underwhelming, the game's base controls and mechanics provide a relatively stable base for a game to be built upon, but did Super Mario Sunshine's developers deliver? Do the game's worlds and missions use these controls and mechanics in a fun, creative way to make an ultimately good game, or did their efforts fall flat? Find out what I think of Super Mario Sunshine's world and mission design in Part 2 of this old school game review. If you're watching this on its day of release, Part 2 will come out in 2 weeks with a highly enough Let's Play in between as per the usual, but if Part 2 is already up while you're watching this, go ahead and watch it. Thank you all so much for watching, and tell me what you thought of the points I made down in the comments below. I love hearing what you guys have to say. See you next time, and have a great day.